One of the reasons that I find Christianity to be so compelling is that it is riddled with impossibilities that you cannot easily explain away. Whether that's the 150 Eucharistic miracles that have been thoroughly tested throughout the church's history, the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which still I cannot comprehend, in all of the layers of miracles that exist within it, or the Shroud of Turin for the same reason. However, one source in particular that is loaded with impossibilities is actually the Bible itself. For example, take Psalm 22, which portrays the crucifixion centuries before the crucifixion was even invented. But of all the things in Scripture that just really take my breath away, it's the accounts that we heard about today that really, really convict me. Wisdom says this: the night of the Passover was known beforehand by our fathers. So we're back in the slavery of Egypt, right? That's what it's talking about. Now, in the immediate sense, they knew before it happened because Moses told them, right? So one of their own contemporaries. So that's not maybe too impressive. But in Genesis 15, God actually sits Abraham down and he tells him centuries before this happens, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs and will be slaves there. And they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. And this is exactly what happens. His own descendants, centuries later, live 400 years of slavery in Egypt. And when the time comes for them to flee, the Egyptians are so disposed to them, they give the Israelites all their gold, their silver, and their jewels. Thus, says Exodus, they plundered the Egyptians, which is a fulfillment passage. That's amazing to me. But what's also equally interesting is the very response of the people to this message that God gave their father Abraham. Wisdom goes on and says, your people awaited the salvation of the just and the destruction of their foes. How? In secret, the holy children of the good were offering sacrifice and putting into effect with one accord the divine institution. Now, in the literal sense, that means they celebrated the Passover, right? The night that the angel went out and took all the firstborn of the Egyptians. But in the wider sense, this became a habit of life for them. While the world around them in Egypt was doing its thing, working its 9 to 5, having kids, engaging in politics, whatever, God's people were busy quietly anticipating the fulfillment of this promise through rituals and devotions in their own homes, through transmission of the faith, one generation after the next, all the while knowing for the most of them, they knew it would never happen in their time because it had to go on for 400 years. But they kept moving. They do the same thing way later in their history when they're in exile in 540 BC. So if the Exodus happened in 1350 BC, fast forward to 540. Again, they are captives to a foreign nation. This time it's Babylon. And the archangel appears in the book of Daniel. It's all recorded, chapter 9, if you're interested. Gabriel appears and says to Daniel, in 500 years, the anointed one will come, and he will be a prince. He will put an end to sin, atone for iniquity, establish everlasting righteousness, end the age of prophecy, establish a new covenant, and he will minister for 3.5 years, and then he will be killed. Like, that's super specific. That's amazing to me. And once again, they waited. Centuries passed. Kingdoms rose and fell exactly as Gabriel had described to Daniel. Whole generations grew up, got married, raised families, died. And they waited and they waited, but not passively. In secret, handing on the promise to the next generation, living it in rituals, repeating it in scriptures, praying for it every day. In fact, they combined Gabriel's promise with the prophecy of Isaiah, who said that a netzer, which is Hebrew for shoot, shall sprout from the stump of Jesse, meaning that this prince is actually an heir of the throne of David. And so intensely did they believe this that as the day drew near, only about 100 years before the time of fulfillment, David's own line built a town named after the prophecy Netzareth, or we would call it Nazareth. And there it was at the time Gabriel foretold. After 500 years, the archangel appeared again to a virgin betrothed to a man, and Jesus was born. And the rest is history. Does that blow your mind? Who needs Netflix? And what is so impressive in all of this is that neither Abraham or Moses or Joseph, who all uniquely bore the promise, were alive to see it fulfilled. But they believed, they celebrated in secret, and they handed it on to the next generation. Folks, they set a pattern for us. That's the whole point of the letter to Hebrews that we heard today. They are models of what faith looks like, one generation after the next. Because you too bear a promise. Jesus said in the gospel today, "Do not be afraid any longer, little flock, for your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom." Now, just for fun, the word pleased here in the Greek is the same word that the Father uses at Jesus' own baptism. You know when he says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased"? In other words, what Jesus is saying is that the very pleasure the Father takes in his own beloved Son, he has in you and bestowing you a kingdom. Do you believe that? As time presses on, and politicians fight among themselves, and news reports the highs and lows of another day, and you clock in another full session of your hours at work, do you believe that the Father delights in you and takes joy in giving you a kingdom? Do you celebrate that in your home with different devotions or spiritual exercises? Are you anticipating it by your prayers? Do you read it in the scriptures? Do you repeat it to your children? Do you guard your heart against a wayward culture to keep poised for the day of fulfillment whenever it comes? That it's coming at this point to you should be certain. But what we must decide is whether we and the generations after us will be ready when it does.